if I look back maybe in the last 2 decades, we have been spreading more lime. Irish farmers, they are taking the step, they are spreading more lime, but maybe just not enough lime. If you look back over the last 2 decades, we're hitting somewhere around 1 million tons per year, like, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, but we probably need to double that.
It's me, Deirdre Glenn, here, your Teagasc Sustainability Advisor. Cathal is away at the moment, but you're still very welcome to the Teagasc Environment Edge podcast, number 107, bringing you the latest information, science and opinion to improve farm sustainability. Today, we are joined by Mark Plunkett, Teagasc Signpost Programme Training and Development Specialist, who joins us to talk about the benefits of lime. So, Mark, you're very welcome to the show. Congratulations, I think, are in order. You have a new role, okay, just fresh in there. And I know you're extremely busy. You have a great team of people around you. So can you just tell us a little bit about, what your new role is?
Yeah, I suppose in the last 2 years, I've joined the Signpost program, very much working on climate and reducing emissions, and yeah, looking, I suppose, at all the areas where we can help reduce emissions on farm. And look, I suppose fertilizers are central to it, livestock, things like soil fertility, liming, all, I suppose, good management, Deirdre,
Mhm.
that's the area that I'm now working in, I suppose, with a focus around the whole area of emissions and reducing emissions as we head towards 2030.
And you've loads of farms involved in that program as well. It's
We
really
have
flagship stuff that's going on.
Yeah, we have 120 demo farms, which are leading the way across all the main sectors, dairy, dry stock, and tillage. And, these farmers are taking on the new technologies, whether it's protected urea, improving soil fertility, animal breeding. And I suppose, trying to meet that challenge of a 25% reduction in agricultural emissions by 2030. And again, things are going quite well as we speak.
It's fantastic to have them, as a flagship as well, and use the information from those farms to put, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Like it's great to see farmers putting it in practice. Like, you know what I mean? Whether it's improving soil fertility, getting clover up and running, reducing chemical nitrogen usage, as I said, the whole animal breeding side. No, it's very pleasing to go onto those farms and see farmers putting the technologies into practice and getting on the road in terms of meeting targets or commitments in the years ahead.
Now, Mark, you sent us all an email here at Teagasc about a week ago or so about lime, and that it was titled "Keeping Us All in the Green." So more lime required to keep us all in the green. What's that all about?
Yeah, look, I suppose it's something that I look, I do keep my finger on the pulse in terms of lime usage, and I see it as very important in terms of, as I was saying, keeping us in the green, you know what I mean? I suppose, as we move towards 2030, there will be more challenges to make better use of especially nitrogen. And lime is central to that. And the department released some figures there for the first 3 months of 2025. And I suppose, Deirdre, look, lime usage is up on, I suppose, 2 low years. 2024 was a quite low year, the first 3 months, and 2023 was, better than 24. But I suppose what I was looking at, we had two good years in 2021 and 2022, where we hit around 1.3, 1.4 million tons. And I suppose, look, I suppose in the last number of, I suppose if I look back maybe in the last 2 decades, we have been spreading more lime. Irish farmers, they are taking the step, they are spreading more lime, but maybe just not enough lime. Like we're hitting, if you look back over the last 2 decades, we're hitting somewhere around 1 million tons per year, like, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, but we probably need to double that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just our soils, our climate. We have a big lime requirement nationally, and again, that would be reflected in the soil test results that are coming back,
Mm.
and in through the Teagasc soil testing service.
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases, up to now you had reps and you had loss and you had different schemes and programs, and then you had the National Liming Program, which came in 2023, which gave farmers that €16 per ton. So I suppose lime in some cases was kind of driven by programs or environmental
Mm.
programs or being assisted in the application of lime. I suppose also as well, you see within the derogation process, it's built into the regulations as well, isn't it?
Exactly. There is a requirement there to maintain good pH, as you say, on the derogation. I suppose, as you say, historically has been driven by schemes. Um, but I suppose it's for me, it's it's central in terms of soils, in terms of soil fertility. Like we have a big deficit, especially on dry stock farms. Like, if you take, soils less than a pH of 6.2, they're 62%. On dairy farms, 39%. On tillage farms, again, 39%. So, despite like there's been, I suppose, a big effort put into lime, I suppose, in the last 2 decades, but we still have a lot of soils out there calling for lime or need lime. And I suppose, look, I have my eye a little bit on the future.
Mm.
Deirdre, like, in terms of the challenges that we face, and I say nitrogen, in terms of like we're trying to keep in term from a climate perspective or in a productivity perspective, we're trying to keep lime somewhere around that 300,000 tons. And again, I think if we're to do that, I think we need to spread more lime. By getting the pH right, it brings many, many benefits in terms of nitrogen use efficiency, making better use of the nitrogen that we apply in chemical fertilizer, also the nitrogen that we apply in our organic manures, and also soil nitrogen. We can release up to 70, 80 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per year. You know what I mean? By just keeping the pH right. So there is big, big benefits there.
So out and about, like we're out with farmers and we're looking at soil samples within even with my work as an ASAP advisor. Um, there's a lot of soil acidity out there. And I suppose farmers sometimes find it difficult to get their heads around, pH and soil pH. Could you kind of give us an indication then, what is it in simple terms?
Yeah, look, I suppose on mineral soils, we're looking for a pH somewhere around 6.3. You know what I mean? If we want to get clover into a sward, we're looking for a pH of 6.5, slightly higher. But I suppose the biggest driver of soil acidity here in Ireland is rainfall. So again, the lime or the calcium gets washed out of our soils and it increases the soil acidity. And as the soils become more acidic, I suppose the biology, the life in the soil sort of shut down, and it's not a nice place for the earthworms, the bacteria to be, and they don't work as hard. So, but by keeping the pH up around that 6.3, the bacteria, the bugs, the earthworms, they work harder, they chew up the organic matter, they're more active, and they release available nitrogen. Like we've tons of organic nitrogen, anywhere from say 5 to 15 tons of organic nitrogen per hectare in a typical mineral soil. And the earthworms and the bacteria, they'll mineralize about 1-2% of that on an annual basis by just keeping the pH right. So I suppose it's like going home on a winter's night, and the stove is lighting and the room is nice and warm. It's a comfortable place to be. I suppose by keeping the pH right in the soil is the same for the bugs and the bacteria. They'll work harder for you. And look, there's other benefits as well in terms of, soil drainage, soil aeration, soil structure, and also phosphorus. Like, phosphorus is very much in the spotlight now. And again, by maintaining the pH in that optimum zone, like we fish in a very small pool in terms of
Mm.
soil P availability. So keeping the pH around that 6.3, 6.5, increases the supply of phosphorus. And by just getting the pH right, Deirdre, like you could move a soil index, you know what I mean, you know, for, you know, for maybe where you apply maybe say 2 tons of ground limestone, depending on what your requirement is on the soil test. So,
Yeah.
there's big, big benefits there.
So you're really
Um,
saying it's kind of the master variable, really, between, having your
well,
pH right is so crucial.
it's the foundation, like you know what I mean. Like soils, in terms of growing grass, productivity. By getting the pH right, you unlock all the other benefits. I say you increase the biology, you improve the structure, and you increase the nutrient supply. And like,
Mm.
we talk about, you know, take on by liming an acidic soil, you could probably grow 10 to 15% more grass from just
Wow.
spreading that 2 ton of ground limestone. You know what I mean?
As-
I'll say depending
Yeah.
on what's on the soil test report, like.
I think as well, like, we were looking at this, when we were coming up to do the interview, the availability of nitrogen also has an effect on phosphorus and sulfur and calcium and magnesium and sodium and also molybdenum and your high molybdenum soils. There was also a figure thrown around that around a pH of 5, only 53% of the nitrogen and 34% of the phosphorus and fertilizers are utilized. So that's kind of scary, isn't it?
Yeah, like if you look at the whole area of nutrient use efficiency, like possibly, the heavy lifter, let's call it, is lime. Like you mentioned some efficiency figures there, but if you take, ground that's low in pH, low in P and K, we're getting about a 35% nitrogen use efficiency. So that means if we spread 100 kilos of chemical nitrogen, we only utilize 35 kilos of that nitrogen. And by improving the pH alone, we increase the efficiency to 51%. You know what I mean? So we go from 35 to 51. So now we're using more than half of the nitrogen that we apply in that 100 kilos. And if we get the P's and K's right, we can go to about, up to about 65% efficiency of that nitrogen. So there's a major gain, and like, that puts money back in our pockets. We don't need as much nitrogen, and it also helps us in terms of climate, in terms of reducing emissions from the fertilizers that we spread and also from our soils.
That's fantastic. Now, Carl isn't here today, but he's big into compaction and, trying to sort out issues on farms. Would lime have any benefit?
Again, it would, like, it's often, it helps soil structure, it brings the particles together. Like if there's a compaction problem, it won't solve it. You'll probably have to go in and maybe cultivate or subsoil or whatever, but it'll improve soil health. It'll improve that activity of earthworms going up and down through the profile. I mean, it increases aeration. The earthworms will give you drainage challenge. So by having, a soil with the optimum or the correct pH, it's a healthier soil. You'll have a more vigorous sward, more rooting, and that all feeds into a healthier soil in terms of nutrient supply.
I
So
suppose it
yeah, look,
starts off the crumbling process as well, doesn't it?
yeah, it creates that flocculation, or that
Mm.
that binding of that attraction of nutrients in the soil. So like, yeah, I say lime has many functions, and
Mm.
it's a low cost input as well. It's an age old technology. It's low cost, and there's big benefits, like, for the world that we live in today, and especially the challenges that we face in the years ahead.
So, Mark, we have two different types of lime. You have your calcium lime, your magnesium limestone. Um, in what situations do people use the different types of lime, or is that indicated in soil tests as well?
Well, if you do a magnesium test, which you'll have to request on top of a standard soil test, it will tell you the magnesium levels. But in general, Irish soils tend to have good levels of magnesium. Like, from memory, there's only about 20% of our soils in pockets around the country that will be deficient in magnesium. On
That
the
leads
lime
to
type,
grass tetany, I suppose, in land
well,
too.
not well. It's just as low. Like
Okay,
lime, magnesium lime won't solve a grass tetany problem. Like, but
okay.
you know what I mean. But in terms of the types of lime, then, like we mainly have calcium lime in this quarry. There's probably in the region of about maybe 40 plus quarries in the country, and they're mainly calcium quarries. We have, I think, to my best knowledge, we have about three magnesium quarries, and they're mainly in the southeast. They're mainly in I suppose, the Carlow Kilkenny region there. So not everybody will have access to magnesium lime, but there will be traces of magnesium in calcium lime, like, you know what I mean,
Okay.
depending on the quarry or the rock deposit. Like, so there will be a little bit of magnesium there. Yes, it's mainly calcium lime that we use, and again, it's very effective, and I suppose it's the one-stop shop in terms of building pH or getting that long-term control of soil acidity.
Brilliant. And then, okay, we'll go back to basics. How do we determine our lime requirement on farms?
Again, when we take a soil sample and get a standard soil test done. You know what I mean? We get pH and lime requirement back on that soil test. And again, that's the most reliable information, Deirdre, and it's specific for the soils on your farm. So, like, one key message I'd say to all your listeners here on the show is that only spread lime based on an up-to-date soil test report. And up to date, I mean, something that's been taken in, I suppose, the last to 3 or 4 years. That's the most reliable place to get the correct advice. It'll give you the specific the right recommendation or the level of lime required to bring the pH to the target pH for whatever crop, whether it's grassland or tillage crops that you're growing.
Because you lose lime like with drainage water, with crops and livestock. So that's why it's very important to have an
Ye-
up-to-date
Yeah,
soil. Yeah.
the rate of loss, look, it'll depend, I suppose, on many factors. I suppose the big thing is rainfall. So again, it depends on your location. Like very little is taken out by animals, very little is taken out by crops. I suppose nitrogen usage, like the more nitrogen you use, the more lime that you will burn out. But I suppose that rainfall is the main driver of lime loss, followed by nitrogen. And as I said, then offtakes by animals or crops are actually quite small.
So we were doing some work, as part of the ASAP program, and it was saying that they can remove between 250 and 625 kilograms of lime per hectare, and that's in the free draining soils.
Yeah, per
So
year.
per year, yeah,
That's a sort of a ballpark figure. Like,
yeah,
but
yeah,
as I say, look, my measure is the soil test. Like, you know what I mean? It's the most
yes.
reliable. You know what I mean? It'll depend, on the soil type. Do you know what I mean? Say light versus heavy soils, and also the climate as well, or the weather. Like, but look, I would strongly emphasize that if you haven't taken soil samples, get an up to date soil sample and go from there.
Brilliant. Is there any good or bad time to lime, Mark?
Look, I suppose Deirdre, no, there's not. Look, you can spread lime any day of the year, provided ground conditions are good and it's not impacting on the livestock inside in the field. So, like, we're at an ideal time as we speak. There's a lot of grass being cut. Hay silage being cut. I've never seen as much grass on the ground and
Yeah,
being
it's
baled
true.
up as we speak. So there's a perfect opportunity there now. If you're not going for second cut silage, now is the time, Deirdre, to be getting on the phone, pulling out the soil test results and ordering a lorry load or two of lime and getting it out. Conditions are good and it'll start working and improving those pHs. Like, and I suppose the first thing you will see is that your fields will be greener. And that's down to that supply or that mineralization of nitrogen and other nutrients there.
And is there a maximum rate in which you would kind of
We
cut
generally
it
talk
off at?
about
Yeah.
we generally talk no more than 3 tons per acre in a single application.
Okay.
And again, if you got, say, a large application, maybe 4 tons, we generally say split it, spread 2 tons now and come back in 2 years time with the remaining 2 tons.
Would we be in any fear of overliming?
Yeah, overliming is I have seen that spreading too much lime is not good. As I say, we like to keep the pH somewhere around 6.3 to 6.5. Once we head up to 7, we start locking up things like phosphorus,
Mm.
that you get calcium phosphates, magnesium phosphates, and also you can upset the balance in terms of trace elements, in terms of the manganese, the copper, the zinc, they can
Okay.
become locked up as well. So again, as I say, it's back to the soil test report, you know, see what's needed and go from there,
Great. And then it's interaction with other substances. So, like, when do you go out with your cattle slurry or your protected urea? And has it any um, effect on the utilization of your N, P, and K and your silage ground? So, I suppose we'll start off with the cattle slurry and the urea. Is there a time period that you leave between spreading, say, slurry or protected urea and your lime?
In terms of the slurry and the lime, go with the slurry first and
Okay.
give it a week, and then come with your lime. If you do it the other way around, you have to wait 3 months. If you
Okay.
go with the lime first, and if you go with the slurry, and I suppose the risk there is that you're putting, you can lose up to half of the nitrogen through, if you put that cattle slurry nitrogen into high pH, you can potentially lose half of the nitrogen through volatilization. In terms of fertilizers, there's no issue with protected urea. So
Brilliant.
again,
Good to know. Hmm.
there's no issue there. And again, no real issue with any of the other fertilizers, either your 18612s or your other types of nitrogen there,
And you just leave a gap between your silage and the lime as well.
Yeah,
Make sure
again,
it's fully washed in and
yeah,
yeah.
we generally talk 3 months, Deirdre, you know what I
All right,
mean?
okay.
that's what I was saying. Like, that if you're taking hay or silage as we speak, like, and you're not going for a second cut, there's a perfect opportunity when fields are cleaned off there now to and ground conditions are good to get some lime in and get it working, like.
And would you encourage people to have, say, if you've traditionally had soil results where your lime has been in deficit, could you do a maintenance lime application each year, or would that have any benefit?
Well, look, I suppose the old advice, Deirdre, was that you spread 20% of your farm every year. That was the old advice, and I suppose that's probably changed a little bit now with regulation in terms of that we tend to sample the whole farm. Um, like uh, I would tend to go in and I suppose start with the fields that have the biggest time requirement and work from there. And I would do it. When I get I'd work. I suppose for 2 years on a new set of results, and then give when you go back and resample those fields, see what your lime requirements are at that stage, like.
And I suppose as it gives you the best bang for your buck, really, as a fertilizer source as well, doesn't it?
Well, really, it's the first thing we should do, like, you know what I mean, before
Yeah.
considering, especially building P's and K's, like, that we should get the pH right first, because the chances are, if you're farming on acidic soils, you're more than likely going to get a bounce in terms of improving the soil pH supply or the availability of the index for a small investment in lime. So really, that should be the priority, like, or you know what I mean? Like, I suppose, look, 2025 has been, I suppose, a reasonably kind year to us in terms of a good spring, good prices for meat and milk. And, I think, lime is a small cost, and, with a bit more money circulating out there, I think people should be definitely, investing in lime. It's a
Mhm.
long-term investment and will pay a big dividends in the years ahead, like.
Brilliant. And just in terms of reseeding, if anyone's thinking of reseeding in the next couple of months, would they have been better if they'd done it a year in advance, or is it okay to
If
go?
Yeah, if you could, look, that's the ideal scenario, Deirdre. Like, you know what I mean, that if you can correct the pH, a year or two in advance, or have the pH is right, absolutely. But again, reseeding does provide an opportune time to get lime in and work it into the seed bed. Just at seeding or just before seeding, like, you know what I mean, to regulate pH again, to get good establishment of that new reseed, like, you know what I mean, in that first 3 to 6 weeks, having, I suppose, everything on tap for those new grass seeds in terms of your lime and your P's and K's, essential to getting, a well-established sward. And also for clover as well. Clover likes a higher pH, like, you know what I mean, a pH of 6.5. Um,
Mm,
so like we're talking an extra ton per acre on a standard recommendation there that clover likes a higher pH, and we need to maintain higher pHs for clover to maintain the productivity or that's going to stay in the sward and fix the nitrogen and do what we need as a crop as well as a clover sward, like.
brilliant. Listen, thank you so much for coming on the show, Mark. Again, you're now a firm friend of the show.
No bother, Deirdre, no bother.
There's some brilliant facts and information there. And I suppose if one message would be for farmers, actually soil sample, send them off, get them analysed, and where lime is required, start your liming program. Talk to your Teagasc advisor, and get it out. It has benefit to the soil. It's got benefit to the microorganisms. It's more money in your pocket, really, Mark, isn't it?
Absolutely. Now is the time, and it's the month of June. We're midway in the year. You know, yeah. As I say, if you have soil test results, take them out of the filing cabinet or take out the fertilizer plan and make a start. Absolutely.
Great. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, Deirdre, no problem. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of the Teagasc Environment Edge podcast. Thanks to Mark Plunkett, Teagasc Signpost Programme Training and Development Specialist, for joining us on the show. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple as well as Spotify. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Deirdre Glenn. Join us next time for the Teagasc Environment Edge podcast, Signpost Farm Sustainability.